Happy Earth Day, everybody. Let's play some Captain Planet.
Ah, Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Yeah. Yep, say what you will about the cartoon it was based on, but like it or not, it got a bit popular back in the day, I suppose, and as a result ended up getting a video game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, regardless of whether you liked the show, or hated the show, or were just indifferent about the show much like I was, there's only one thing that can be agreed upon by people who fall into any of these three categories, and that's Captain Planet and the Planeteers for the NES is most definitely not worth your time. So the whole premise behind Captain Planet is pretty simple. There are 5 missions in the game, each divided into 2 segments, the Planeteer segments and the Captain Planet segments. The Planeteer segments put you in control of one of the Planeteer's 3 aircraft, the Geo Cruisers, the Ecocopter, and the Eco Sub. Each of these 3 craft play differently from each other. For example, the Geo Cruiser will constantly cruise forwards or backwards in some cases, much akin to your average scrolling shooter. The Ecocopter can move about freely, but your shots will shoot at an angle when you're moving forwards or backwards. And the Eco Sub moves about underwater, obviously, and sluggishly. And the one most useful power is ineffective here. Now, regardless of what craft you control, and you have no control over what craft you get to use, it's dependent on the mission, control's pretty much the same. A button shoots projectiles based on one of the 5 Planeteer elements including fire, water, wind, earth, and heart, while B button turns the craft around and lets you fly and shoot the other direction. Of the 5 elements at your disposal, only fire, earth, and wind can be used as offensive weapons against the forces of evil. Water is used to wash some animals on the beach, while heart is used to communicate with nearby animal friends. Oh, it can also be used as a tractor beam to carry elephants from point A to point B. Each of these stages usually have some objective that you have to accomplish in order to progress onwards. For example, in Mission 2, you have to give chase to these oil tankers and prevent them from dumping oil into the river. Failure to do so will cause the sky to turn black and the Planeteers to commit suicide. Must be some ritual Planeteer thing that I'm unaware of. Likewise, in Stage 3, there will be some whaling ships with nets that you'll need to influence a bigger whale to bump to clear the way. Sometimes these objectives are fairly straightforward, but other times it requires a bit of thinking and perhaps a bit of reference into an instruction manual that you may or may not have. Now, in any case, you have to be sure to use these planeteering powers at your disposal economically because they are limited. Yes, that meter on the top of the screen represents how much power you have left, and to make matters worse, all 5 elements are tied to the single power meter, which means if you run out, you're pretty much screwed. There are icons to refill this meter, but this usually involves destroying a set of enemies or performing some ridiculous task. And unfortunately, these levels require you make good use of those powers to either accomplish a goal or just simply progressing towards the end of a level. I can understand the idea they're going for here, but I just think it's a cheap way of introducing a level of challenge to a game. And this game does pose some challenge, as contrived as it may be. There's 2 things in the Planeteer segments that can decisively screw you over: questionable collision detection and unbalanced difficulty, which is due to a variety of factors, but the collision detection in Captain Planet is pretty spotty for the most part, as the game has very little give for extremely tight fits. Usually in these cases, you'll have to tread carefully so that you could just barely pass through the narrow spot, because it generally feels like a mere paint scrape will cost you a life and force you back to that checkpoint you've passed. But this generally takes a turn for the worse in the Arctic level and the falling snow towards the end of the game. Collisions are a constant dog to be dealing with here, and they are painful to endure. Collision issues is a primary contribution to the overall difficulty of these segments, which I mentioned was unbalanced, and that's probably not the right word to use in retrospect. This is something that's more of an issue with the Planeteer segments than it is the Captain Planet segments, but the issue with the difficulty stems from a number of factors. Your objective in each stage is not clearly outlined, and you're often left trying to figure these things out for yourself. It's not a big deal on its own, you have a brain, some of these things are often easy to figure out on your own, but then along with the collision issues and limited power supply you have to conserve as much as possible, each of the Planeteer's aircraft you control feels somewhat floaty, and it's often difficult to get precise movement when you really need it. Slow is one thing, floaty is another. Floaty is bad, especially in a game where tight corridors are a factor and often a life or death situation. But hey, if you manage to make it to the end of a level, you get a nice little password to save your progress, and get the privilege of summoning the good captain himself. The Captain Planet segments are a little more straightforward. You basically guide the good captain through a labyrinth of chaos in order to find the boss, destroying deadly foes with your completely ineffective and utterly worthless punches, and navigating traps and hazards by transforming into the appropriate elements. Whenever you transform into the elements, you gradually drain energy from your power meter, which also doubles as a health meter for Captain Planet, so once his meter is completely drained, you lose a life. Of course, colliding with certain hazards and sections of the level will also kill the captain instantaneously, regardless of how much energy you have left over. Fortunately, the game is generous enough to stock you with 5 extra lives whenever you start a new stage. There's also unlimited continues and passwords. Oh, and unlike the Planeteers segments, where when you die you restart at a checkpoint, you'll more often than not respawn at the last spot you were killed. Go Planet. Or not. Much like the Planeteer levels, playing as Captain Planet is a bit of a chore. For the majority of these levels, you'll often find yourself transforming into the various elements in order to pass through toxic falls or garbage. When you transform, Planet will roll into a ball before transforming and unroll when you change back. The transition from planet to element and vice versa takes about a second, leaving Cap vulnerable to attack during those periods. I don't mind the transition, I'm not expecting anything instantaneous, but in a game that relies on you constantly changing forms to overcome its challenges, a second between transformations feel like an eternity and does slow the pace down considerably. Half a second probably would have been a good balance between pacing and stuff. More than that, however, Captain Planet doesn't feel decisively powerful due to his limited moveset and his tendency to die instantaneously upon colliding with some slime on a wall. While there are icons that can restore your health or grant temporary invulnerability, there's always a lingering feeling that Planet should be able to do more than just spin into a tornado or punch things. I always thought it made sense that Captain Planet should be able to pull off the Planeteer attacks as well, you know, like shooting fireballs or tossing rocks, that sort of thing. Captain Planet is supposed to be this all-powerful being that's called upon to handle something that's beyond the Planeteer's power or ability, and yet this game makes it so that the Planeteers actually possess a better set of powers than Captain Planet. Once again, collision detection is a bit of an issue, especially when it comes to navigating extremely tight corners filled with toxic waste. Even the slightest touch will send Captain Planet back to the planet in the sky. Difficulty in these levels is not as bad, it's a matter of navigating these mazes and figuring out what powers to use in order to pass through what object or this or that or whatever. Doesn't make the game any more enjoyable, I'm afraid. Oh, you might have noticed I never mentioned how to cycle through the elements. That's with the start button. The select button pauses. You would think that the opposite would have been more logical, but I guess Captain Planet doesn't believe in logic. Or something. Might be logic pollution that I am not aware of, or I don't know. I don't care. The graphics are probably Captain Planet's strong point, which is faint praise at best considering the rest of the package. The various Planeteer ships look rather nice. Captain Planet himself looks pretty good for the most part. The idle animation where he's scratching his head is a rather nice touch, I like that. The various villains look like what they're supposed to, and with rather impressive detail. The level design is actually visually pleasant, even if the mostly dark chambers of the Captain Planet levels are solidly detailed works of pixels, and there's seldom a point where you can't instantly recognize what's what. It's a nice game to look at if nothing else. Unfortunately, you eventually have to play the damn thing, and that's what takes Captain Planet down to slightly above 0. But visually speaking, the game looks pretty good, I have to say. The intermissions are nothing to write home about. These usually comprise Gaia pointing at a screen while random images and sprites appear, and in between levels you get the Planeteers as represented by talking heads. They're nicely drawn at least, but that's really all I could say in that regard. The soundtrack for Captain Planet doesn't fare well, I'm afraid. Unsurprisingly, the Captain Planet theme song that people either love or loathe is nowhere to be found in this game. Also unsurprisingly, the music that is featured in this game is pretty much ass. Perhaps some of the worst NES music I've ever heard, and I've heard some really horrible chiptunes in the 20 plus years I've been playing video games. It's almost like some high school kid discovered how to make NES music for the first time in his life, banged out a nonsensical collection of noise, and voila! New 8-bit score! Oy. Yeah, and the sound effects are pretty, meh. That's what I say when I have nothing positive or negative to say. It's called thought recycling. Like I said at the top of this video, Captain Planet on the NES isn't worth your time. If you were a fan of the show from back in the day, you'll be appalled by the way the game treats the source material. If you didn't care for the show or outright hated it, the game is still not worth your time. Despite giving you different flavors of gameplay and try to add these little bits of puzzle solving to spice things up again, Captain Planet falters in making any of these segments decent or even worth your while. Whether it's questionable collision detection, or the unstable difficulty, or the dull, unrewarding gameplay in general, Captain Planet is simply a miserable experience that only those with plenty of tolerance and patience will be able to sloth through. Perhaps the best use for this cartridge would be to recycle it and be done with it.